Senator Warner's next on the web.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Dr. Murthy, it's great to see you again, at least remotely. Let me pick up on where my colleague, Senator Hassan, left off and about some of these online challenges. And I think Senator Thune mentioned this as well. I would say to my colleagues, we have broadly bipartisan legislation called the Detour Act that would prohibit the use of dark patterns, not only for kids, but also for adults, of the ability of these platforms to kind of lure you in and no way to opt out. We've all seen, click here and no other exit vehicle. Our legislation as well specifically prohibits companies from using some of these manipulative features for children under 13. I know, Dr. Murthy, you already kind of addressed this, but this kind of legislation, I don't want to be hitting you cold. You may not have seen it, but the idea of trying to look at the manipulative tools and dark patterns, I got to believe has got to be part of this effort going forward.
Well, Senator, it's good to see you virtually as well again. And I do think that there are potentially harmful tools and algorithms, like on some of these platforms, which can lure young people further and further down harmful paths, and that can have adverse impacts on their mental health and well-being. We need to limit kids' exposure to harmful content, and the algorithms, I think, are an important part of that. So I do think that this requires investigation. I do think that this is an area where safety standards would be very helpful as well.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, I would commend my colleagues, Senator Fisher and Senator Thune on the Republican side have joined with me and Senator Klobuchar on this Detour Act. And as we make some movement here, looking at these dark patterns, looking at this kind of manipulative behavior, at least for kids, although I would argue it ought to extend to adults as well. I think, again, topic that I think Senator Langford raised, and that's one of the huge outgrowths of COVID-19, unfortunately, as we passed 900,000 deaths just recently from COVID. As of November 2021, there are 167,000 children had lost a parent or a caregiver from COVID-19. And the truth is there's been a group put together called the Hidden Pain, and I would again urge my colleagues that going after these kids who are going to have special needs because they've lost a parent or a caregiver. And obviously there's huge mental health implications. Dr. Murthy, you want to comment on that specific issue around kids who've lost their parent or caregiver?
Senator, this is one of the most heartbreaking consequences of this pandemic. The trauma of losing a caregiver is hard to put in words. It's one of the greatest traumas a child can go through. And the consequences of that loss will be there not just for months, but for years. I think it is so important that not just as a government, but as a society, that we are there for those kids, whatever may come. I know that there are federal funds that are currently going towards supporting foster services and other services to support those youth that local and state government may incur. But I think this goes beyond government as well, to where thinking about how we ensure that healthcare providers and educators understand how to provide a trauma-informed approach to education and care, because trauma is what these kids have gone through. I think it's also going to be essential that community organizations, from churches to synagogues to YMCAs and others, are able to step up and support these children, as many of them are doing already. But we're going to need that in the years going forward because they've experienced a tremendous loss.
I agree, and I think we need a organized, structured effort to support those efforts at the local level. My last question I want to raise with you, and this is not something that unfortunately just came around with COVID, and it's frankly a challenge that has touched my family and probably many of my colleagues, and not directly with friends or neighbors, and that is the enormous upsurge in challenges around eating disorders. I've dealt with this for the last 12 to 14 years on a family basis, and have seen both the enormous growth of treatment centers. I've seen the enormous growth of boys, not just girls, but boys dealing with eating disorders. Obviously, this problem in the litany of problems that have been exacerbated by COVID is something I think we need to address. And I think a disproportionate number, my child's got a type 1 diabetic adding eating disorder is huge. We've seen increased numbers of children of color, children of LGBTQ kids. Can you, in your last 10 seconds or so, at least touch on that issue, which is something I think we all are going to have to continue to revisit?
Absolutely, Senator. And this is a place where we not only need good care for kids struggling with eating disorders, but this is where actually school counselors and mental health professionals in schools become so important, because you want to catch the signs early. You don't want to wait years or until severe health consequences have developed, for this to come to the attention of a healthcare professional. Finally, I'll just say this is a place also where it's so important for us to understand the impact of social media on our kids. We know that some children when they have encountered content that has made them more conscious of their body image in an unhealthy way, that may contribute to eating use disorders. Again, this is a place where the data matters, transparency matters, and we've got to make sure the companies are providing that data so we best know how to protect our children.
What Senator Warner is talking about is extraordinarily important, and I'm only moving on because we're going to try and see if we can get Senator Menendez, Senator Brown, and Senator Cortez Mastow in before the
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And we'll get, yes, he's before you too. Okay, it goes Menendez, Brown,